Hello folks, and welcome to the channel, or welcome back. And in this video, believe it or not, we're going to work on old Rusty. And we're going to restore the sidestep and the fender. And as you can see, the fender has known better days, so we'll have to cut parts out and then make a new metal panel to put that in, roll the beads on it, and then bend it all in place, and then actually have it welded into place. And as you can see, the sidestep is really deteriorated, so we will have to create a new one for this, because this one is not recoverable. For the sidestep, I will be using 3 millimeters thick steel, which is thicker than the original part. And for the fender, I'm going to use 1.5 millimeters steel. So the original sidestep, and how far that is still original, of course, is 2.5 millimeters. So the first thing I'm going to do is to create a template out of thick paper or cardboard representing the actual sidestep. The first thing I will do now is try to draw a sketch on how this step is constructed. So let me do that. This may look a little bit strange to you point, but this is how we need to create it. So this is the part in the back here, which is we're going to fold up. This is the part here on the side here, which we're going to go down. The front part is this one that needs to go down. And the side here, there's wing, that needs to come up, and this has to be bent to the left, which is the flap all the way at the end. And that should be about it. So we need to make this kind of a form in cardboard. So before I do now, I'm going to take some dimensions on this, and I don't want to keep you busy with all the dimensions that I need to take. And I will come back to you once I've made them all, and then we'll create the cardboard model. These are all the dimensions to which I have to work. So now I'm going to try to make this out of cardboard, and then we place it actually on the sidestep before I remove the old sidestep. The sidestep is wider in the front than in the back, so it's not really square. But still, I'm going to start by marking off a square on my piece of paper, which is the maximum width and the maximum length that I have on the step. And from there on, once I have that square on there, I can then work it out a bit better, what the differences are, and I can draw my lines. So I'm going to start by drawing up that square, and I actually have my piece of paper on the edges of that steel panel that you've seen before. But on a straight angle, so it's all aligned, so now I can draw that very easily. So let me just do that, and then we're going to continue in a few seconds to make all the remaining markings. And it has a total length of 1.5 meters. By the way, this is a very handy tool because you can adjust the angle. But before you use it, it's always good to adjust it towards your real angle, because sometimes it is very hard to read the scale on this, and you shouldn't really trust it 100%. So now let me line this up. I'm going to start marking this piece of paper so I know what is my upside, what is left, what is right. So now it's just a matter of transferring all the dimensions from my sketch onto that piece of cardboard or hard paper that I have to actually create the template. So I'm not going to show you all that. I mean, everybody can draw lines on a piece of paper. So all the dimensions are now transferred from my sketch onto the paper. So now I can start cutting it and then folding it. But before I do so, I always like to double check my dimensions, because I don't like to start all over again. So this is always good to double check. And I think this is looking quite all right. So I can start cutting it out. You want to be as accurate as possible, because this is going to be the template that I will transfer to the metal sheet. So here it is, our template. So now it's a matter of folding it. I already marked which direction to fold it. So that's what I'm going to use this metal bar here. So it makes it a bit easier to fold it right. All right. Just need it to fold a couple more sides. And then we should be all set. Right. So let's have a look how that will fit. So it seems like this is going to work. So now we need to transfer it to the sheet metal, and then we're going to grind it out with a small disc or a very thin disc, and then we're going to start folding it. Now, folding it, I would like to do it on a brake, but I don't have a brake that can fold 3mm thick sheet metal, so I will have to cut a groove in it on one side so it gets thinner. Then I can bend it on the bench here, and then we're going to weld up. I do prefer a yellow pen because a black one is less visible. The next step is to cut this out now, out of the steel panel, and for that you could either use a plasma cutter if you have one, or you can use a grinder with a very thin cutting blade, because that works real well. So the cutting blade that I'm using is about 1.5 to 2 millimeters, so this is perfect to cut. There are a couple of ways to cut this. So either you do it by hand, and if you have a steady hand, this will work just fine. But you can also use a metal guide that will guide you in the right direction, right? So you could place one up like this, lock it in place, and then just slide along this metal bar. I'm going to use a metal bar along my line just to scribe the line. And I'm going to hold it in place with these spanners. So now I have a very nice line I can just follow. And the disc will stay in that little groove. Now you're going to need a couple of those cutting discs because they are wearing out pretty fast on the 3mm thick steel panel. All right, so now we're going to do the other side and then we are done. I think we have it cut out as good as. Here we go. So that's our step. And this part, well, it's something we're going to use later on for some other purposes. So we still need to cut out some edges, so I'm just going to remark those. So now that we have the panel cut out, I still need to bend it, but before I do so, I'll like to clean up the edges. I think this is the right time to do it. And to clean up the edges, I'm using one of those discs, and these are very, very handy discs to use to clean up edges. It's kind of a layered sanding paper, but it's very, very good. This is a brand new one, but I think I'm going to use a used one because they last a long time. So let me put that up. Not quite sure what you call those, but these are really good discs to clean the edges up. And here we have such a disc, and this is like layers of abrasive paper all layered on top of each other, and while you're progressing using it, It's going to rub off, of course, but it's always going to have something new underneath because it's layered. You keep having good abrasive surface. So very handy stuff, and it comes in different sizes and different grains. Really good stuff. This is I think it's a 60 what I'm using right here. So now the panel is ready to be bent, but before I do so, I need to mark the lines where I need to bend it. And I also need to cut some grooves in it so the material is thinner so I can actually bend it on my simple workbench here without using a brake. And then we will weld up these weakened areas with the TIG or the MIG. I don't know yet which one I'm going to use. Probably it's going to be the MIG. And then we have a pretty good panel. So let me mark those up, and then I'll show you on how we're going to bend these edges and flanges. So here's our template. I'm just going to place it where it's supposed to be. Yep. I'm just going to mark some extra areas where we still need to cut and where we have to do the flange, basically. So here I need to bend it. And I'm going to bend this down. So I keep marking those things because otherwise you will forget, and then I might actually bend it in the wrong direction. And that has happened to me before, and that's not a good thing. Because you don't want to redo all this. This is pretty intensive work, and metal is not all that cheap anymore. So I drew the lines on the panel where I'm going to do the half cuts so I can bend it. So now I'm just going to measure some distances as a double check compared to my sketch, because I want to make sure that this is absolutely accurate, and it looks like it's going to be all right. So now I'm just going to cut it like I did last time, but I'm not going to cut all the way through it. I'm just going to cut along the edge where I'm going to bend it. You might have noticed that I keep my grinder sometimes a bit in an angle. That is just to make kind of a V-groove before I start bending it. Now, of course, if you have a brake that can bend 3 millimeters of sheet metal, use that, right? But mine can't. I can only go up to about 1.5, and that's already on the edge. So now I'm going to go through this one more time, but from another angle. And I think this should now be bendable. But before I do so, I will grind all the grooves on this panel, and then we start bending. So now that we have cut the grooves, we have weakened up the panel, of course, and that will allow us to bend it. Otherwise, I can't bend it. For bending it, I'm going to use a piece of thick steel that I'm going to place underneath. And then I'm going to use another piece of steel, which I will place on top, and the panel will be in between. I will clamp it together, and then I'm going to gently knock it with a hammer until we have the proper bend. And hopefully this is going to work just fine. But we need another big clamp over here. All right. This is a lead hammer, and it doesn't make any indents on the sheet metal. With this hammer, you might have some indents, but it's going to go faster, of course. Right? So let's use this one. You might have noticed that I have cut the bending lines or the grooves on one side of the panel. And that might be a little bit confusing because some parts we will fold up, other parts we will fold down. But the reason that I've cut them all on one surface is that I don't want to see the welding afterwards when I'm looking on the step. That means that now we're going to have parts of the panel where we're gonna fold the side away from the groove. So if this is the panel, we have the groove on the top. Some parts will fold down like this. For those, you don't need to have a V-groove because we're just taking the metal apart. That's easy bending. Now other elements, as you just have seen, like this edge right here, this is where we're having the two parts and the groove is in the middle, and we are going to bend this up. So we're bringing the elements together of the panel inside the groove. And that's why you need to have a V-groove. And this is exactly what we had here. So you noticed while I was bending this edge here that I couldn't get it any further, and it really doesn't make sense to hit it harder because the metal parts here, where we did cut the groove, the V-groove, they are hitting each other. And with these thick panels, it doesn't make sense to try to bend it even more because you're just going to have a very ugly bend. So all what I need to do now is to run through this one more time with my cutting disc, and then we can bend it further. So as you can see, we are almost having a 90-degree angle. To straighten up the panel, I have another piece of metal in the back, which is a bit thicker, so now I can hammer against it. So now it's time for the next side, which we have to fold, and you can either fold it up or you can fold it down. Folding it down is a bit easier, but because I have the edge already here, I'm just going to fold this one up, and that should be working properly. All right, so that looks good. So now it's time to bend the last part, and after that we can start welding. So it's almost doable by hand. So it all depends how much you have cut the edge. Now the deeper you cut, the more the weld has to be. But okay, this is good enough. It worked. But as you can see, it is not all the way straight yet. Now it is. Right. We still have to bend the flange on the back side here, and this is what we're going to do next. So now with the side step all shaped, now we can start welding it up. And as you can see, there are no grooves at the inside. So wherever I did cut a groove to bend it, it is not visible. It's on the back side. But now we need to weld that in the back side because this is not very strong at this moment in time. So now it's time to weld, and I already have opened up the barn on both sides, so I have a breeze coming through because welding fumes are not very good for you, and I don't have an extraction system. Of course, you're going to need a helmet, and this is an automatic helmet, which is really handy, so you will see where you start, and once you start arcing, then it gets darker on the screen here, and then you can continue welding, which is very handy. Otherwise, you have to flip it down with the manual one, and I'm not that good with it. You also need a couple of gloves. And then, of course, you need to make sure that everything is really square when you start welding. Now, to make sure that things are square, of course, I will use my square here, but also I'm using some magnets. So to hold panels into place, it's very handy to have some strong magnets. And these are welding magnets. So you can place them in a 90-degree corner like you see here, but you can also place them like this, or you can place them like this if you need a 45-degree corner, but you can also place them at a 45-degree corner, you know, as you can see. So very handy, and I'm going to use those on here. Although my panels are still fairly fixed to the other panel because I didn't cut all the way through. But if you have loose pieces, this is very handy to assemble metal constructions. So I'm still going to use that, and obviously I'm also going to use my normal square because that is probably even more important than anything else, but with this I can adjust things. So I'm going to start welding in different areas. I'm not going to weld a continuous seam. I'm just going to do small pieces so that the panel doesn't distort, and then I will fill up the open gaps until I have one seam along the complete edge. So I'm going to be using a MIG. This is an automatic or semi-automatic MIG. I just need to set the thickness of the steel on the dials and set it for the right material and the right gas, and off I go. Then I'm all set, and I actually can start to weld along the seam that I need to weld. So let me set it to, we know it's 3 millimeters, so I'm going to set it to 3. So the gas that I'm using is a mix of argon and CO. Put my ground up, get the magnet in place. Now we can start. So the first thing I'm going to do is tag it in different places. So now I'm going to continue to weld along this line, but I'm going to stitch it, as you see, with different distances, so I don't heat up the panel too much, because otherwise it's going to distort. Once it's cooled down, I'm just going to fill up the open spaces. So here you see the final weld where we've done all the stitching, and now I just need to clean that up, and then I do the rest. Now to clean it up, I'm going to use the same abrasive disc as I've shown you before, because that really does a good job. And I think that is more than good enough for this side. This is a bottom side. So let me continue with the other sides, and then we trial fit the panel on the truck. The panel is now all welded up, and if you look at it, then you won't see too much of welding seams. Yes, there is a little bit of welding through because it has to come through the metal, but not a lot, and that's okay for a truck, and I'll show you that in a second. But the big welding is always at the back side, and you can't see that because that's underneath the step. So as you can see at the inside, we just have a little bit of welding through, which is okay because you want to penetrate deep enough into the metal, and I think this is all right. It really doesn't disturb me. Once this is painted, you will barely see it. And as this is a side step, people will step on it anyway, and they will scratch it and whatever. So let's see if we can get this old step removed. Some of the bolts I will have to grind off because I don't think I can release them. They are so rusted. We'll have to clean up some of the sides here. But what I noticed is that the bolts on the side are not metric, and you would expect this being a French truck or a European truck. You would have metric bolts. Reality is I had to use a 1/2 inch socket for these bolts, which is a bit awkward, but okay, it will work. So let's see if we can get it out. And it did work. So now that is loose, those I will grind off. Well, here I see some bars that are not original, so I think I can cut those off. It's all loose. I think there's still a support underneath. Yeah, as I thought, there is one. All right. So let's see if it's loose. It is. So this was this one support that we had here, which is still in a good condition, so I don't need to make a new one for this, so this can stay. There is one in the front as well, but that one is gone. So this is the front one, or the leftover of it. And then we have this part here, which is actually connecting to this outrigger. So that's also a part we can recover, and that is just bolted down, so that should be easy. I'm just going to grind off the bolts. So that's what's left over from that support. So I will make a new one. And the other piece is that one that we recovered. So that is still good. The piece that is going to go on the outrigger, and it's kind of adjustable, as you can see. So that is good. So I still need to knock out the bolts that we have cut off, so I can drill the holes later. So I think something should be here as well. All right. Well, the frame has a little bit of rust, but nothing serious. So I'm just going to clean that up now before we trial fit the other part. So let's see how our step will fit. Obviously it has to go up, but let me bring it first to level and then we see. That's number one. Let's see if this is going to work. The side step is now installed, so now I'm going to mark it on the chassis where it should sit. I'm also going to mark where the bolts will be. We'll drill the holes and then I can bolt it down. But one thing I noticed is that these side steps are pretty big. The originals were very big as well, and they were very sturdy. And I think that is because these trucks also were used by the military, and they had very strong requirements so that soldiers could stand on the sides of the truck. And you might have seen this in some Second World War movies, that the Germans were driving around with these U-23s where the soldiers were actually standing on the side. So I think this may be an ex-military vehicle. Not sure, but I think so. Also based on the paint that I see, there's a lot of green paint on it, khaki paint, so that really points to a military past of this vehicle. Anyway, let me mark it all up, and then we put the bolts in, and then we'll do the last support there, and then it's time maybe for the front fender. So I'm going to put some bolts in, for now at least. So this is an old outrigger, and all I'm going to do now is trace it, and we will cut out a new one. Oh, my pen has had its best time. So this is the old outrigger, and I already have created a piece of sheet metal, 3 millimeters thick, and I recovered the back end, which I cut off this piece actually here. So now I'm just going to weld the two parts together, and then we have a good proper outrigger again. Okay, so now we can completely weld it. And we do the same weld on the other side. And then we should be good. So here's a old one, and here's the one we just created. So I think this is all good and well. So now we can install it. We're just going to bolt it down for now so we can fit the fender. So this is where this outrigger is, and it's going to go up a bit. You just need to bolt down, and the fender will actually come down in between the sidestep and the outrigger. The fender is something we're going to cut along this line, but that will be for the next video, because otherwise this video would be too long. I know I wanted to do the fender also in this episode, but I would have made this video way too long, so that is going to be for the next episode. So keep watching, because more is to come on Old Rusty. And thank you for watching. Bye-bye.